Welcome everyone to the first episode of the Hobby Podcast. And here the objective is very simple. I've always been very fascinated by the many and diverse hobbies to which people dedicate their lives. And what I've discovered is that having hobbies like this are vital to living a full and balanced life. Because otherwise you can become 100% consumed by your identity at work or some other unidimensional characteristic. What you're going to hear are individuals. Some will be with friends, some will be with people that I've been introduced to, but all of them have some sort of interesting hobby. And the hope is that by listening, maybe you find a new hobby, something that you're interested in, or you find the energy and the purpose to rededicate to a hobby that you've had before. Whatever it is, having a hobby, having some other dimension of your life, I think is one of the best ways to fully express yourself and one of the better ways to spend your time while you're on this planet. My first guest is a lifelong friend. I met Wayne when we were kids, and we have stayed in touch through the years. Today, Wayne is a Master Sergeant with the United States Air Force, and his specialty is working with crew supervision and maintenance, specifically for some of the biggest and deadliest aircraft in the United States Air Force. He has been deployed many times to defend our country. He is a husband, he is a father, and today the focus, he is also a competitive weightlifter who has competed in numerous powerlifting and strongman competitions throughout the nation. So with that, I hope you enjoy my long interview with my good friend Wayne. Thank you for joining. It's going to be the first episode of the Hobby Podcast. But to start, I was trying to think, and I'm pretty sure you are probably the oldest friend that I have in terms of I've known you for the most years of my life. And I was like, okay. And so I was trying to think, and I think I can remember, but I wanted to see if you could remember, when did we first meet? I thought I would throw that back at you. And how did we meet?
That's a tough one because we have so much after.
Yeah.
Like there was so much that transpired, and we could go through. You and I could go through the stages. We could be like, oh well, there was. I don't know if I think maybe you and I just knew of each other maybe in elementary school, but I think by middle school there was we had developed a relationship of actually hanging out and stuff like that. But I'd wager to say some of the first introduction was probably a friend of a friend on the bus. And they were like, oh, it's George. What, you don't know George? And I was like, oh.
That's what I think. I think it's either that, or if you remember, Mitch Culbertson used to live in the neighborhood.
Yeah, he was like 2-3 doors down from me.
Right. And he was one of those guys that everybody kind of congregated at his house. And so I'm thinking, so in my mind, I think that I first met you just as, I mean, we were what, 10 years old? 12?
Maybe could have even been younger.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is now almost 30 years ago that we met. If you think about it. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. 30 years ago. But yeah, I think it was just like, we just kind of met in the neighborhood.
No, it's been quite the ride. I enjoy it, and look at where we've become. Look at where we've ended up with. On a side note, I was thinking earlier, like look at how competitive me and you were in hockey coming up in the teens.
Sure. Yeah.
I think, and with recently watching The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, just thinking competitively, there was a lot of good protagonist, antagonist, push and pull to iron sharpens iron mentality of going back and forth when we were young. And it was a lot of emotions got involved, blood got exchanged.
Yeah.
But I think that it was ultimately very beneficial. I would say, man, I owe a lot to you for my success, like in my latter teens for hockey, because I ended up in a very good position probably because of the way we practiced and the way we played each other. And it was a lot of fun for me, and I owe a lot of that to you.
Well, thank you. I could say the same thing back, and I will. And the other thing I think that is interesting is even to this day, when I'm in a neighborhood and I see a cul-de-sac, I look at it and I automatically have an impression of whether or not it would be a good place to play roller hockey, because that's what we did. And
Scout it out. Conditions are everything.
Oh yeah, right. Because maybe it's a little bit too steep coming into it, and then you don't have that big of a playing surface. The ball is just going to roll right down. Or maybe you got to look where the gutters are, because how many balls did we lose going down to the sewer? You know, all these factors go into it. And then you think about, do you get friendlies? Are these friendlies in the neighborhood, or are they evil people who don't want you playing in the cul-de-sac? A bunch of things go into it. But yeah, so a lot of time growing up and playing hockey. Well then, but then I was trying to think about, and this one I think I have a pretty good memory on. I was trying to think about, when did I first see you lifting weights? Because at some point, to get where you are now, at some point you had to go just pick up a barbell and start. And I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about, why did you even do that in the first place? What was it like? What was that experience? When was it? And then, yeah.
Absolutely. So I think coming up a little, I don't mind looking back and doing a little bit of self-reflecting. I honestly believe I had a healthy case of body dysmorphia. I remember getting picked on at a younger age for being skinny. In hindsight, I mean, really, we're going to pick on the guy that's got a high metabolism and tall and lanky. Okay, all right, fair enough. But I think that's kind of how it started, and I liked to address, even to this day, I like to address weak points and or address problems head on. I think a lot of good comes out of confrontation, going face to face with whatever you're, whether it be with other people, needing to sit down and clear the air on something, or in the gym with things that you're not good at. I think addressing weak points and focusing on those, you can turn something very quickly that you avoid or previously avoided into a love and a passion. And the next thing you know, you can grow in that, and it could be some of your biggest conquests. So I would say freshman year in high school was the first time I started lifting, and numbers grew. I like to track the numbers and see how quickly they jumped, but then discovered a lot of plateauing in that as well. And that's when you really, how do you say it? You get some different perspectives. You take on some different exercises so that you don't stay in the plateau. Back then, I didn't know about dieting as much as I do now. We were focused on different things back during that time frame. More of a just to look good in a bathing suit, some beach muscles, if you will. The shoulders, the arms. That was good enough back in the day to be satisfying.
Yeah. Now, you didn't play football? A lot of people, I feel like, pick up weights when they start doing like football or like wrestling as part of like a school program. Did you start at school, or did you start like how did you start? Like did you go to a gym?
I think by sophomore year, I'm not sure if I did it when I was a freshman or not, but by sophomore year I started taking weights, and that probably started the foundation and the love of lifting in general, and discovered that you could have a good time with it, and there was a community within that. But that's where it began.
Yeah. So you took it at the high school. You took like a weightlifting class at the high school.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I also
and repeatedly took it, and I think it was to, like you mentioned, no, I did. It wasn't for football or anything like that. I think it was, like I mentioned, body dysmorphia. It was to feel comfortable in my own skin and to acknowledge, look in the mirror and be like, look what we're putting in. Look what the work is fruitioning into, and wow, you can transform your body physiologically from one thing into another, given the right supplements, the right rest, the right diet. Of course, when you're a kid, you're not as disciplined with those things as fast forward to where we're at now. All the documentation, and it's all available online to educate yourself on how to really dedicate your time to put in 100% to your passion, whatever that may be.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, I remember you and our other friend in the neighborhood, Kyle Kaminsky, used to always, because he had kind of a, like the basic weight setup. So it'd be like, I felt like he had like a bench press and maybe some dumbbells in his garage, like standard issue, basic stuff like that. And you guys used to go over there and do some stuff as well.
Oh, yeah.
Just weights all time, anytime type thing.
All time what?
Anytime, all time. Whenever there's weights, you guys are just lifting them.
Yeah, it became, I would say it grew to becoming more of a hobby. And it's almost like you get immersed in the culture without realizing it. But the transition that took place over time, and we're talking a lot of time, was, I mentioned the body dysmorphia. I went from chasing a look to finding something. Fast forward 2013, meeting my coach, who was a fellow instructor, civilian at that time at Shepherd Air Force Base, and he gave me a little more direction and some more. He was well more versed. He was competing in strongman and powerlifting. Oh. We good?
Just bad internet connections. Got the kids up there streaming Netflix. My bad.
You're all right. I got to watch my
We're all
crutch
good.
words. I keep saying stuff like, at that time.
No, this is good. We'll do it like this, because this
I
way I
hope
have to
you
cellular.
help dissect and chop some of this together. I'm cognizantly thinking about it now, and I'm like, I got to make this good for you. I'm all over the place.
No, this is good. Yeah. Okay. So you first started lifting weights in high school. I think that's probably like a common thing. At some point, people start lifting it. And that was now like 20, maybe 15 years ago, you started doing that. So tell me a little bit more about how did you get from just lifting weights at a gym with like a basic program? How did you get from there to entering? I think you were just talking about how you were about to go to military nationals before all this COVID happened. How did you get from there to being in competitions?
The right push in the right direction from my coach and my mentor, Michael Battolino. He saw the passion and the probably lack of direction, because he would frequently, what are you doing? What kind of exercises are you doing? What are you doing on this day? He was very curious about my methods at the time. I think maybe he was looking for another project, as he frequently does. But I found that the transition and the motivation grew once I went from chasing a look or the way I perceived myself looking in the mirror to chasing goals as far as numbers in certain lifts. Finally, not as if I didn't care about like, oh man, I put a lot on the bench today and and I really knocked it out. It went well, but I wasn't really tracking it. And he just gave me a lot of direction and introduced me to training in the style of powerlifting and strongman. Now, I train predominantly, his programming is for powerlifting and it's for strongman. I gear and I compete for powerlifting. Not as often as you would think. I like to do it at least once annually, but I am very, very focused and goal-oriented when it comes to my numbers in those 3 lifts of squat, bench, and deadlift.
So your coach, how did he enter the picture? How did you meet the coach? Were you looking for a coach? Did it just kind of happen?
It just kind of happened. He taught in the classroom next to me at Shepherd Air Force Base, and we just talked frequently. In fact, he was newer to the 135. He was previous F-15 instructor, so we were together a lot as I was kind of giving him as much information and experience as I had as a 135 mechanic, giving it to him as he was getting on his feet, becoming an instructor for that aircraft. And naturally, in downtime, you're going to shoot the stuff and talk about hobbies and everything else. And he probably invited me over for some sessions, some strongman Saturday sessions in his garage, which was pretty well equipped with equipment at that time for strongman and powerlifting. But he recently made some expansions, and it is a thing of beauty these days.
So you mentioned you started getting into powerlifting and strongman. What's the difference? How was that different than what you were doing before, between just whatever you were doing in powerlifting and then even powerlifting and strongman?
So with powerlifting, you want to be as strong as possible in the movements of the squat, which comes first in a competition, bench second, and deadlift third. And you get 3 attempts at each. And I've learned through time, there is a methodical approach that heeds the most success when doing these things. I think I've only missed I've either been in about 4 competitions. I think I've only missed 2 lifts out of, you do the math, the 9. That's 9 total in one session. So we're talking 36 lifts.
Wow. So how is it methodical? Like, there's a process to it. It's not just you just pick a number and go for it.
So I would say it's very key to watch early what the judges are looking for, whether they're stringent on your movements or maybe they're a little lax. See what they're allowing you to get away with. With that being said, your first lift, you want that to be, good rule of thumb is something that you can move or successfully lift 3 times. You want to go in.
So your first lift is something you can do. You feel confident you can probably do 3 times in a row, like 3 reps of it.
Correct. You should go in there and smoke it. And that sets the tempo for the day. You can see if it moves smooth as it should, green light to go for the second lift. It's something that's about 2 reps. Something you could accomplish with 2 reps.
So this is going to sound dumb, but like as an outsider, I would think, okay, you're training to lift, because it sounds like the goal of the competition is to have, is it the highest for all 3 of them combined? Is it the highest? What's sort of like, what's the,
it is
how
the
do you
highest,
lift?
It is the highest lift out of those, within those 3 lifts, they take the highest lift and they will add all your highest lifts together, and that is your total.
And so do you get a combined total across squat, bench, and deadlift?
Correct.
Got it. And if you miss a lift, are you penalized?
You're not penalized. You just cannot. You are not allowed to go back down. You cannot go below that lift. So that's another thing. You don't want to blow that too early you want to ensure you can certainly hit the first and second lift.
Okay, so that's helpful.
Your final lift is your green light. Do I really go for it today, or do I play it a little safe?
So that's interesting because, you know, I go back to, and we could talk about this too, you know, you've gotten me into watching some of the subculture weightlifting things. Like last week when the deadlift world record was set at, what was it, 501 kilos?
Correct.
And, you know, you got Eddie Hall, who was the previous world record holder at 500 kilos, but in competition. And then you had the mountain. I'm blanking on his name.
Hafthor,
who set it in his gym, which is his local garage during COVID and all that, at 501. But I think so. What I was going to ask is, you know, as an outsider, I would say, well, what do you want to make your first lift when you're like completely rested, you're fueled up, you've been tapering the last week? You know, isn't that the lift you want to go and just go big at because that's the one you're most lifted for? But it sounds like that isn't the strategy you want to go do. That's a horrible idea.
No, it's you want to warm up in succession, and that is almost how we treat competing in powerlifting as well. Your first lift should be just another rep in your warm up. You should go out there and blow your first lift out of the water. The second lift, it should be some medium difficulty. It shouldn't be that big of a struggle. You don't want to put, like I mentioned before, you don't want to put yourself behind and start off way too high. Aspirations like, oh yeah, I'll come in and knock this, let's blow this, and it's done in kilograms as well. So you have to familiarize yourself in the transition from pounds to kilograms. But no, you don't want to set yourself behind early and set yourself up for failure.
You want to kind of go and get something on the board. So worst case, you have a number on the board, but you also are trying to warm up a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So when you were lifting weights 15 years ago, I bet you probably never thought you would go into competitions someday, right? That probably wasn't even on your radar, or was it?
Never.
Never.
I don't think I ever considered competing. I think even getting into the singlet the first time was like, I got to the age that I was like, well, I don't really care. Everyone else is going to be wearing a singlet. It is what it is. And then it's just, that's what you're wearing for the day. Not a big deal.
A singlet, like a wrestling singlet.
Correct. But
okay. Is there a reason for the singlet, or just like people like to wear singlets?
Say what?
Is there like a functional reason for the singlet, or it's just cool? You just wear singlets. That's just what you do. When you're in the Olympics, you have a singlet on. That's just what you do.
I mean, how do I say it? I don't really know that answer. I wager to say it's so no other supporting gear could be utilized, whether it be illegal.
Got it. Yeah. Because when you're wearing one of those, it's kind of tough to hide things.
Correct.
Yeah. So what was it like then when you went to your first competition? Like, when was it? Where was it at? How did you feel? Talk me through, like, what was that experience like? Because I imagine a lot of people, like, it's always scary to go compete at something, right? Especially if you didn't grow up competing and you're just entering it at an older age.
Certainly.
It's scary. Yeah.
I would say it was 2016 in Arlington, Texas. I was very nervous. It's amazing, though, how you can loosen up after hitting a few of your lifts and getting all white lights on your lifts from the judges. And you start to get into the day and the confidence builds. In the same token, it goes the other way. You're kind of sitting in a little bit of a deficit. But fortunately, I'll for squats, my nerves are always, because it's the first lift, nerves are ever present. And but it gets better. It gets better. I feel like by the time I'm done with squats, all three, I'm starting to get in a better place, feel for the judges, settling into the day.
Yeah. So how does the day start? Is it like start of the morning? What do you eat? Like, walk me through like the whole day. How long is it between the lifts? Is it a 1 day thing? Like, what does it look like if you go to your first competition?
So starting off in the morning, you're going to have to weigh in first, which is your first stressor, because typically you want to be as heavy as possible, but able to make your weight. So you've had to have enough consistency or knowing your body well enough to know that you're going to come in and make weight. Haven't had a whole lot of issues with that, is whereas me, the final week going into a competition, I am developing the consistency of my intake and my sleep and monitoring that weight first thing in the morning. I don't typically sleep well the night before a competition. I'm a little restless and nervous. But once that weigh-in takes place, it's immediately carbs and starting to hydrate and get the fuel in the body and get ready for the lifts. After the weigh-in, everyone gets weighed in. That takes, depending on who's running it and how proficient they are, it can take a little bit of time. And the flights are already formed. And the flights are just the group of individuals that you're with within your weight class. And how quickly you can move through is how it dictates how fast your day is going to move. Because every flight from the lowest weight class to the highest weight class is going to have to all go through squat, and all go through bench. So behind the scenes, let's say I've already gone through squats, and now they're starting to get to the bigger guys. They're knocking out their squats. I may start to warm up and start to get ready for the bench, because then we'll go behind stage and we'll start to get ready, and they'll go run through the succession of names. You get in line, put your best 3-6 Mafia hits on, and you get ready to go. And
then you go.
Because it's just you in that one lift, man. Your mental state is huge on that day. Your numbers selection, huge on that day.
Yeah. Now, so like in running, what you often do before a race is that you taper, you kind of cut down your mileage, you rest, you carb load. Do you go through a similar process before you show up for your first tournament, or is it just like you were lifting heavy? Okay. Yeah.
The week before, you may just execute the movements themselves, but with extremely lightweight, just enough to do the movements. You've already put in the work. You're not going to lose a significant percentage of anything. You're not risking injury. You're simply resting up until the competition, which messes with the weight a little bit, your weight, because now you're not putting in the heavy work that you were before. But
and so then you show up for the competition day, you go through your reps, and hopefully you get good numbers, and that's kind of it. What's
Yeah, it's a long day. You're hanging out with friends. I typically compete with my coach, who is a blast to compete with, and we're eating a whole lot of carbs and bad food during the limited. We're not overeating during the day, because it's the meal afterwards out with the boys. It's a good one.
Yeah, I bet. So once you weigh in at the beginning of the day, that's it. You made weight. So if you gain more or less, then you're fine. Doesn't matter anymore.
Nope.
You eat whatever you want. So what's your current best numbers now, and what are you trying to go for next?
I haven't hit a heavy single in quite a while. I am a fan of short-term, long-term goals, and I'm very realistic with what I can accomplish. I'm 37 years old. There aren't a whole lot of significant jumps. Things come and go. I'm very humbled and realistic with where I'm at. As of right now, I'd wager to say I could probably hit 265 for a heavy single right now on bench. Be a grinder, but I think that's doable. And with that being said, if you've seen the powerlifting meets, I have to tell people frequently, it's not a touch and go bench press. A bench press in a powerlifting meet is come down, and once you touch at the bottom, make contact with your chest. You have to be, the judges are looking for the bar to be motionless, which I translate when I explain it to people is it's a pause. You're hitting a pause. So that 265 pounds, while some if you watch NFL Combine,
it's like the
they
bounce
hit 225
sometimes.
as many times as they can, and they're chugging along, and these dudes are strong, no questions asked. But there's a lot of good solid bounce off the chest as they're moving with that, because they're on a time constraint. They're seeing how many times they can possibly hit 225, period. With us, it is a nice, slow and controlled movement down to the chest. You get the up command, and you've got to drive out of that hold. And yeah. So it's a nice
Why
pause.
do they
Pause. It's difficult.
Why do they do it differently? Why do they make you do the pause? It sounds like it's harder.
The rules?
Yeah. It's just some crazy rule about it. And then even like I feel like watching the recent 501 kilogram world record attempt, even when he was doing the deadlift, for instance, you almost feel, it feels like you have judges that are back there telling you when you can let go. You can't just lift it up and be like, you're done. You have to like lift it up and hold it until a judge says something.
I'll do my best to reiterate some of the rules and commands. Bench on technicality is one of the most difficult lifts because you're looking for 3 commands. They're making sure once you unrack it, they're going to give you a start. They're making sure your elbows are locked from the get-go. Everything feet flat, depending on what federation you compete in. Feet flat on the floor. Some people have just their toes. I typically compete in USAPL, which means feet flat on the floor. You still want to create a good arch in your back to engage more of your back. But anyway, you're going to get the start. You're going to come down, make contact with the chest. They're looking for motionless bar so they can give you the press. And then you have to stay locked out at the very top, and then you're waiting on rack. So start, press, and rack is the only one with 3 different commands. And a lot of people, when we lift by ourselves, we just go and we just do. So you have to trigger and you have to engage your minds to wait for these cues. So in the beginning, coach worked on me with that. So it's like, you tell coach, I got it. I'm in control of this. But you develop habits when you're lifting. And a lot of times you're benching and you just immediately, you lock it out and you rack it. There's been once or twice I've gotten away with personally getting a rack command, but my arms were already starting to drift back and I was already starting to rack it. That I probably could have got red lighted on.
So you have to rack it yourself in competition. There's not like a guy that's spotting it for you.
You need the judges so the judges will let you use a spotter. And that means out of the rack and they let go and they're waiting for you solely. Elbows locked, everything good before you get the start. Once they say rack, I believe even your spotter can actually contact the bar and help you rack it. But the judges have to give you the rack command. With squat, a little similar to bench, the timer starts. You're on a timer for all these lifts, by the way. I believe it's 60 seconds when they start it. They call your name, 60 seconds for your one lift. You come out for squat, get underneath, you step out of the rack, you stand there motionless. They want to see that your knees are locked. They want to see that you are fully erect and supported before they say squat. And then when you come up and lock, rack. Deadlift is the easiest of the commands. The timer starts at 60 seconds. The bar is loaded. You're good to go for your lift. You just have to wait for the down command. Just like Half-Thor was waiting. Judge had his hand up. Thor pulls it or locks everything out, shoulders back. knees locked, everything down.
Wow. I can, it feels like if you're a newbie going to your first competition, this probably gets messed up a bunch.
I think it's easier with a repetition of adhering to the commands, maybe experiencing competing. Also with age and nerves, I treat them as cues. I treat them as checkpoints. Like, can't do this until I hear that.
Yeah. Because you learn to listen for those things, and then you kind of go through the movements. Fascinating. So, what's the competition circuit like? Is it, are there competitions like before the world changed with COVID? Are there like competitions every weekend? Is there like an Olympics of it? What's the season calendar look like for powerlifting?
So I don't really know. I'm not that, as I don't compete very often. Like I said, I just do it like maybe once annually with my coach just to kind of see how we're progressing. I typically just do military nationals as of now. I have done, colleges will have them, host them. I'd say they're every few months, and you're somewhere that you can travel to within reason. These federations post them to their websites. Oh no.
Yeah.
They're not hard to find though.
Yeah. Well, then you also mentioned Strongman, and Strongman I think is interesting because I remember as a kid watching like the world's strongest man television commercials, and you have like the Icelandic giants that are always winning. And I'm trying to think, I'm sure if I thought long, I can think of some of the names, like the guys who used to always win, but it was always this kind of cool mythical type thing where people are picking up big rocks and stuff like that. How the hell did you get involved with that? How does that work? What does that look like? How's it different than powerlifting? What's a typical day in the life of that look like? That just seems, it seems like an even more unique and niche type of hobby and sport to be involved in. How did all that happen?
So it's certainly a lot of fun, and it's very interesting. I've only done a small handful of strongman competitions, but I never thought I would find myself either going to a World's Strongest Man, which they had in Bradenton, Florida last year, which is like an hour from where I live. So I went. I got to see these monsters live. They're ridiculously huge. It's not with how much I'm starting this weight gain, which is interesting. I might feel more susceptible or likely to do some strongman competitions. It piques the curiosity a little bit. But it's not my main driver. It's not how I train on a regular basis. Before COVID, I was going over to my friend Justin Hamby's house, who we shared the same coach, and he actually has a lot of strongman equipment. So strongman has a lot of exercises, like you'll have some medleys, whether it be a keg, a frame, or farmer's handles, where you're walking or moving as fast as you can with these objects, or even yokes that are loaded with weights. It'll have pulls, deadlift, rears its head in the strongman sport. It'll have pushes, whether it be axles or other interesting apparatuses, if you will, overhead. Stone lifting. There's a variety of movements, and I think it fascinates us as individuals to watch people do unorthodox lifting and watch the upper echelon do it, and it's fun. It's fun to do it yourself. These are very interesting movements that involve a lot of core strength, and you never really know what you're geared towards or what you excel at until you get out there and start doing these things. And there's a lot of technicality and technique involved with these as well. So It's not like we immediately load up to, let's put 500 pounds on a yoke, walk down the street. No, we start with the yoke. It's like the one Justin has, like 200 pounds empty. Tighten the core, get underneath, lift it, walk as fast as you can. Fast feet, not big strides. Big strides can do a lot of swaying, which then causes imbalance while you're moving with it. But there's just like powerlifting, there's a lot of those kind of play on each other's strengths. Like I said, my coach competes in both. They're both conducive for him. I gear more towards one than the other. But I find strongman a lot of fun, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a consideration. I don't rule it out from doing it in the future.
Yeah. I remember always watching like the guys doing the truck pulls, and I was like, how are they pulling the semi-truck? That's incredible.
My coach several times for fundraisers for local charities has pulled fire trucks on Shepherd Air Force Base.
Wow. How do you train for a strongman? Like, I know you mentioned like sometimes you can get like the yoke, and sometimes you can get the different farmers carries, but like you can't just get a fire truck that you pull down the street. So how do you simulate some of those movements? Like, what are some of the core movements that you can simulate so that when you show up for competition and they're like, pull this fire truck, you're like, all right, cool.
So you say that, but they actually sell, I wish I could give you the technical name of it. They sell a apparatus that you can hook to something static that's weighted down, obviously, and it will simulate the load. It will simulate the load as you start to move with it. So you set up a rope on something else and you start pulling.
And so you can almost simulate the idea of pulling a tractor trailer truck because it has some kind of tension on it.
I mean, I've seen my coach pull his truck before too. He'll hook up his harness to the hitch or whatever, or not the hitch, the hook up on the front of the truck and attach the rope to something that's fixed and start pulling.
Yeah, hopefully it's like on a level street. I can see if it's downhill would be a problem.
I've talked to him about it before. I've seen him do the fire truck pulls on base at least twice, and he mentions there's a slight incline. You can watch him as it gets harder right there. You're like, oh man.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, strongman I think is always interesting because it just has always seemed, I remember just watching I feel like it was those ESPN Wild World of Sports things. And the memories I always remember are the people doing the strongman or the Ironman Kona. It was always like these small little niche sports that somehow made it on TV that I thought were always just interesting because the people just seemed crazy to do them. And it's just neat the more you learn about it. It's actually it's something you can go do. You can go to a strongman competition and pick up big rocks and put them on pedestals and kind of get a chance to go through some of those motions. It always just sounded fun and interesting.
So they sell a lot of this equipment. You can buy actual.
Yeah, now there's a market for you, right? Now you can buy it, yeah. And I wonder, do you feel like that's making it more accessible that now you can go and buy some of these things, whether it's the simulated load to pull a truck or whatever it is? It sounds like you can go buy them off Amazon or whatever it happens to go be.
Oh yeah. It's
That's great.
Yeah, my friend's got Justin's got a lot of equipment that and Michael's got absolutely almost anything you can come up with in his garage.
Yeah. Cool.
Years of purchasing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we could talk all day about this. I've already talked your ear off for an hour now, and I have a bunch of questions, but I don't want to go on forever. So I think I'll just wrap it up with kind of one last thing, which is you talked a lot about kind of what it's like to do the competitions, what it's like to do weightlifting, some of the physical benefits that you've gotten, some of the community that you've met, some of the ups and downs that you've gone through as part of the training in the process. If you look back over the last 10 years or so of you being in weightlifting and doing the competitions and growing, like, how do you feel like having this hobby has been helpful to you? Helpful for you more than just it's made you stronger? Is there any other ways that you feel like having this other dimension has been helpful?
Direction and accountability. Once I transitioned from chasing an aesthetic look that was pleasing to me, I found it much more interesting and goal-oriented to chase numbers. Now, I know that sounds silly, but it increased my drive and my accountability and commitment to stay after it and continue doing what I'm doing to be as best I can in the movements that I do. So I understand that I compete mainly at the end of the year as it goes, or once a year annually. I do the powerlifting competitions, but I do a lot of other movements that augment those movements as well. So PRing in something even like push press, or having a great day in something like that, and hitting numbers means a lot to me, and it keeps me motivated, and it keeps me going. So the drive and the accountability to have numbers that I ultimately want to hit, and I'll if and when that day comes, because I can spout it off to you if you ask. If and when that day comes, I'll make new numbers. I'll make new goals. I plan to do this until I cannot do this anymore.
It's great. I love it. That's a great answer. Well, that's all I have. Thanks, man. It's been fun to talk with you. This has been fun. Thanks for doing this.
Oh yeah, 100%.
She says it's time that I be going on, 'cause there are better things out there for you. She says that every time I see